but that Russia is at war with the West, that has been part of his overarching view, as I say, expressed in one form or another since the start of the special military operation. So I don't see a great change in that respect. What has changed in Mr. Putin's narrative in the last week or two has been this concession that he made on the 19th of December when he had this combined annual press conference and direct line communication exchange with the whole Russian nation by a special call center. And at that meeting, he said that he regretted that he didn't start moving on Ukraine earlier and that he waited too long. This is a very debatable point, but it raises something that is in the background here in U.S. alternative media, and is championed by somebody as well known and widely followed as Paul Craig Roberts, that Putin has been too mild, has turned the cheek, has been too much of a good Christian and not enough of a good statesman to do what should have been done in time and not to allow Russia's adversaries or enemies abroad to misinterpret his restraint as a sign of weakness, which could only encourage still greater provocations and encroachments on Russian national interests. That is, an issue that he just barely touched upon when he said that he regretted he didn't start earlier. Nonetheless, he's doing a pretty good job of catch-up because what Russia has been saying what Mr. Putin has been saying in the last couple of weeks is really reading the riot act to the United States and the West. The stress on the power of the Oreshnik middle range hypersonic ballistic missile, that has been a large part of the change. And it makes me ask how serious he is in saying that everything should have been started earlier. There wasn't any Oreshnik 2 years ago. Russia's stepping out on the stage and acting in its own self-defense at the risk of enraging the global hegemon, that has coincided with Russia's ability to produce and to field new, decisive, strategic weapon systems. And that is all very current. As I've said in the past, the notion that all the problems could have been solved if Russia had been tough in 2014 is utter nonsense, because Russia was unprepared to withstand a U.S. economic assault. I don't mean a military assault, that's a separate question, but an economic assault, all the sanctions from hell, Russia would have gone under in 2014 if it had had a military victory over Ukraine. It would have been a Pyrrhic victory. So going back to 2014, out of the question. Going back a little bit, maybe, but not very far. 2018 is the year when he rolled out all these systems, and rolling them out and showing them to the public because they had passed tests and were going into production. Going into production is not the same thing as having them in the field. And some of this equipment obviously takes time to produce. The Oreshnik is said to have entered serial production, and estimates coming from the States, because the Russian Ministry of Defense naturally says nothing about its production capabilities. But from the States, where I've heard estimates that 25 Oreshniks can be produced per month. That's 300 per year. Well, you don't start threatening to use the Oreshnik until you've got at least a few in your hands, because your bluff might be called. And so it is with the other weapon systems. Not all of them have been put into production. I mean, there were 6 or 7 different strategic weapon systems that Putin showed in March of 2018, this is the last stage of the presidential election campaign at that time. Putin had foregone participation in the televised debates, and he made his presentation to the public in in the form of the large section of his speech that we call the State of the Nation speech, the annual speech that he makes to the bicameral legislature. And he rolled out these systems, and he had them shown theoretical diagrams of how they work on the screen. But that's not the same thing as having them in hand and ready to use them if need be. So I don't think he could have backed up very far to launch the special military operation. What he could have done, actually, is to have prepared the forces that were going to go and invade Kiev, Ukraine, better. Because all reports that I've seen, or that I heard, just say accidentally, from a taxi driver who was a retired member of the military intelligence in Moscow, and who was complaining about what he heard from his former colleagues. This is 2 months into the special military operation, that the initial steps were disastrous because the troops weren't prepared. They didn't have all they needed. They were just rushed in. They were on military exercises, and they were moved from exercises straight into an invasion. So there, things were rather sloppy. But how much better it would have been if the preparations were begun earlier? Well, that's a debatable, interesting question.